Welcome to the Daily AI News Digest. I'm your host, and this explainer is sponsored by bestai.org. It's May 25th, 2026. Today, we're cutting straight through the noise to examine the actual market realities, capital deployments, and macro events that are actively shaping the artificial intelligence sector right now. Right now, the global AI cycle is being defined by a pretty intense convergence of geopolitics, structural software integration, and labor policy. So we're going to look strictly at the facts today and break down the operational impacts these developments are going to have on enterprise operations. Here's our agenda for the day. First, the biggest moves. Then, product realities, followed by regulation signals, and finally, the analyst's take. Let's dive right into Section 1. The biggest moves today, focusing on capital and hardware shifts. So, during a keynote at the IEEE International Symposium on Circuits and Systems in Shanghai, Huawei formally introduced something they're calling Tao's Law. Now, for decades, the industry has relied on Moore's Law, right? That focuses on geometric scaling, basically making transistors physically smaller. But because Western export restrictions have limited China's access to advanced EUV lithography equipment, Huawei had to propose a completely different physical mathematical model. Tao's Law actually focuses on time scaling. By using a proprietary layout technology they call logic folding, their goal is to continuously compress signal propagation delays. This effectively lets them bypass the physical constraints of traditional geometric miniaturization. In terms of actual execution, Huawei reports that over the past 6 years, they've already designed and mass-produced 381 chips based on this Tau scaling law for mobile and computing applications. Their stated target? To hit a transistor density equivalent to a 1.4 nanometer process node by 2031. We're going to see the first commercial test of this logic folding architecture in their new Kirin processors, which are scheduled to launch this fall. Make no mistake, this is a clear strategic maneuver to build an alternative development path completely outside of Western lithography constraints. Shifting gears to enterprise capital deployment. $4 billion. That is the initial capital commitment behind the newly announced OpenAI deployment company. This venture is backed by a 19-firm consortium led by TPG, with co-leads including Advent, Bain Capital, and Brookfield. Now, this represents a massive structural shift in the market. The deployment company is a majority-owned subsidiary of OpenAI, and as part of the launch, they're acquiring Tomoro, a London-based AI consulting firm. That brings in roughly 154 deployed engineers on day one. This is a major capital pivot. Instead of just competing on model training and API access, OpenAI is investing heavily to own the enterprise implementation layer. They're embedding engineers directly inside client organizations to build production systems. It sends a clear signal. The bottleneck for enterprise AI isn't model capability anymore. It's integration capacity. Moving on to Section 2, product realities, taking a look at software and infrastructure. Following Google I/O 2026, let's look at the strict alignment of their Gemini updates to actual operational business functions. First up, Gemini Spark operates as a 24/7 background agent, specifically designed to automate tasks across Workspace and Salesforce. Then there's Antigravity 2.0. This is their agent-first development platform, which is notable for its secure credential masking when orchestrating multiple agents. Finally, Creative Studio natively integrates Canva and Adobe directly into the Gemini chat interface. If you're an operations leader, you should note that last point carefully because it creates an immediate opportunity to audit and potentially consolidate duplicate creative software subscriptions. Concurrently, Google rolled out its May 2026 core search update. The data shows this update is actively altering search visibility to penalize automated, thin SEO aggregator sites. Instead, the algorithm is heavily prioritizing established brands and official government domains. This aligns perfectly with the broader integration of AI overviews, which really require highly trusted entity signals to function without hallucinating. Over in the data center infrastructure space, Promise Technology debuted its GreenBoost 2.0 specifications at Computex today. Partnering with Toshiba, this JBOD architecture integrates high-capacity HDDs with their proprietary NVMe Boost technology. The objective here addresses a very cold business reality, the acute power and cooling constraints in modern data centers. By optimizing the data pipeline and reducing storage power consumption, this infrastructure allows for much higher GPU utilization, all while staying within strictly capped energy limits. All right, Section 3, Regulation Signals and Global Policy Actions. So how exactly is policy reacting to AI disruption in the labor market? Well, this is the core macroeconomic question currently triggering state and international legislative action. The widespread implementation of autonomous agents is officially moving from a technical novelty to a very real catalyst for workforce displacement, and governing bodies are starting to issue compliance mandates in response. Take California, for example. Governor Gavin Newsom just signed Executive Order N-6-26. This mandate requires state agencies to study labor market shifts tied directly to AI. Specifically, it enforces a strict 180-day deadline to draft updates to the California WARN Act. This will very likely require employers to provide advance notice for mass layoffs directly caused by automation. The order also evaluates severance rules, equity compensation models, and customized retraining playbooks. Interestingly, the state data identifies women as facing a disproportionately higher risk of displacement in administrative sectors. On the international security front, government ministers from the UK and Australia signed a formal bilateral agreement in Canberra today. The pact establishes structured channels for both nations' AI security institutes to share frontier AI safety research and coordinate threat intelligence. They are specifically monitoring how advanced models could potentially be leveraged in cyber attacks. That brings us to Section 4, the analyst's take on these market trajectories. Let's map out the impending market friction points on a timeline. This month, May 2026, OpenAI committed $4 billion strictly to enterprise implementation, effectively proving that integration is the new competitive battlefield. Looking ahead to fall 2026, the global hardware market will test Huawei's new Kirin chips. That's when we verify if Tao's law can actually deliver that 1.4 nanometer equivalent performance without Western EUV technology. And then, by November 2026, the 180-day deadline for California's WARN Act updates will pass. That's likely going to establish brand new legal precedents for automation-related workforce restructuring. So, based on today's data, here are the cold business realities that enterprise operations leaders simply have to navigate moving forward. First, vendor selection is no longer just about which base model is the smartest. It hinges entirely on integration capacity and the cost of embedded deployment teams. Second, hardware and infrastructure investments are pivoting sharply towards solving acute energy and thermal limits in the data center. And third, corporate legal risk is definitively shifting toward algorithmic labor displacement and the compliance required when you automate existing roles. Looking ahead, the next catalyst the market is watching will be the verified storage benchmarks coming out of the Computex 2026 floor. Those will really test the claims regarding energy-efficient hardware architectures. So as capital floods into enterprise integration and governments race to regulate labor displacement, the question operations leaders must ask themselves tonight is this: are you preparing your infrastructure for the models of today or the autonomous disruptions of tomorrow? Thank you for joining us for this explainer, sponsored by bestai.org. Until next time, I'm your host for the Daily AI News Digest.